Good morning, students from the Jamaica School of Preaching and Biblical Studies, and welcome to all of you who are joining us at jspmona.org on YouTube. We are reviewing for our final exam in April. We have finished the lessons for this trimester. And so we're going to be reviewing in this first hour, lessons 16, 17, and 18. Lesson 16 is the presuppositional argument for the existence of God. And in that lesson, I will tell the students what they need to focus on for the final exam, so that you can aim and not miss. You will know exactly what to prepare for. That's right. The same is true with lesson 17, the design argument for the existence of God, and lesson 18, the existence of the universe argument for the existence of God. In each case, in each lesson, I will let you know exactly what to prepare for. We're going to begin with prayer. Is there anyone from the student body who would like to lead us in prayer?
Let us pray.
Good.
Almighty Father and God, we return for yet another day. We thank you for this aspect which we are gathered here to study your words and to learn more about biblical apologetics, so that we can defend the gospel. We pray at this time that you may continue to bless us, bless the teacher as he teaches from the word and from the notes, so that we can learn something as we go from it. Continue to bless the proceedings of today and continue to be with us through your choices blessing. These are the mercy God through the authority of your Son Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Okay. Year 3, Robin. Okay, students and listeners on the internet, we're getting right into our review for the final exam. So we start with the general objectives for this review and the specific objectives. General objectives: 1, to review lesson 16, the presuppositional argument for the existence of God. Number 2, to review lesson 17, the design argument for the existence of God. And number 3, to review lesson 18, the design argument for the existence of God. In the second hour, we're going to be reviewing lesson 19, Jesus Christ's argument for the existence of God, and lesson 20, the experiential argument for the existence of God. But that is on a different PowerPoint, which I don't have on the screen now, but will be on the screen later, God permitting. Specific objectives. Number 1, at the end of the revision of lesson 16, students will have been able to define define the word presuppositional. Number 2, at the end of the revision of lesson 16, students will have been able to list 9 presuppositions of atheists. Number 3, at the end of the revision of lesson 16, students will have been able to discuss 4 implications of presuppositions of atheists. 4, at the end of the revision of lesson 16, students will have been able to discuss 4 inconsistencies of presuppositions of atheists. Number 5, at the end of the revision of lesson 17, students will have been able to show how the design of 3 tiny machines in the cells of living things prove that there is a super intelligent designer, God. Number 6, at the end of the revision of lesson 18, students will have been able to compare the view that the universe came from nothing and the view that a super intelligent being designed the universe. Now we're looking at the definition of presuppositional. And students, you have to know this meaning of the presuppositional for the exam. So this page is a page you need to focus on. Presuppositional, what does it mean? And you can always define it in your own words. Once you understand an idea, you can express it in different ways and still bring out the meaning. Presuppositional consists of 2 parts. 1, pre, which means before, and 2, suppositional, meaning thinking, what you suppose, what you consider. It refers to a view that a person has on any topic at the beginning, which is assumed to be true before any information is looked at, which may either prove or disprove the assumption. It is the same as what we in Jamaica call preconceived idea. Yes, an idea that you have thought about before you have even looked at the evidence, but you think this is the right idea, which a person has before he has investigated the idea to find out if it is correct or incorrect. It is also known as a worldview. That is a core, and the word core means central. A core or central set of beliefs by which a person interprets every information that he sees, hears, reads, touches, tastes, feels, and experiences around him. It is the starting point of view from which a person argues an issue. So you need to know the meaning of presuppositional. You don't need to memorize this. What you need to do is to understand it. When you understand it, you can say it in a different way from me, yet you're saying something that has the same meaning as what I'm trying to communicate in this definition. So that's the first part of the final exam. The very first part, you need to know the meaning of presuppositional. Okay, let us move on. Now, we're going to be looking at presuppositions. You are not required for the final exam to be able to list the presuppositions, but knowing the presuppositions will help you to be able to discuss any one inconsistency in these atheistic presuppositions. So what you will be required to know is how the presuppositions are inconsistent. I'll soon remind you about what that is. But right now, let us look at some basic presuppositions that every and any atheist have. Number 1, there is no God. 2, everything in the universe came from nothing as a result of the Big Bang. 3, this universe came about by chance, accident, and coincidence. 4, there was no planner, designer, and maker of the universe. Well, that is implied if you start out by thinking there is no God. 5, the order and design in the universe was accidental, by chance, or coincidental. 6, we got lucky in this universe, but there are other universes out there called multiverses that were not lucky. Just to say something about this, there are no observational evidences for the existence of any universe other than the one we are in right now. Astronomers even say that they don't know the majority of what is out there in this one universe that we have. And if you don't know that, how can you know that there are other universes out there? That is just a speculation or a guess, because the atheist realizes that there's quite a lot of order and design in the universe which they cannot adequately account for. Number 7, there is no absolute right or wrong, just choices based on preferences. Preferences means what you like better than some other thing. Number 8, there is no life after death. Number 9, there is no God to give account to after death. Any atheist and every atheist are going to have these starting points of view. Now, let us look at the implications of these presuppositions. Number 1, if there is no God, then there can be no logic or reason. That applies to everyone. And the reason I say that is that in order for us to have any uniform, correct reasoning about any topic, it means that the brain would have had to be made in a particular way, to think in a certain way. But if every brain that is out there in human beings is the result of chance and accident and coincidence, then how can someone use one kind of reasoning, which is said to be correct reasoning, and expect that everybody's brain will reason in that way? If we are all the result of accidents and chances and coincidences, there is no such thing as a uniform or one and the same correct way of reasoning, which is what logic means, the correct way of reasoning things. So there can be no logic if there is no God. To have logic, it takes a rational God, a God with great thinking abilities, to be able to create human beings like himself who can think in a similar, reasonable, and correct way. But if there is no such designer and everything was left up to chance, then how can we use logic? How can the atheist rather use logic to try to prove that there is no God? Number 2, if there is no God, there can be no scientific laws that govern the way the universe operates. For scientific laws require consistency, not chance. If I were to jump up, if it were a matter of chance, if it were a matter of accident that I came back down on the floor, then it should not be the case that every time I jump up, I come back on the floor. There is a consistency about this. Consistent, and no science, you cannot have any law in which you can predict what is going to happen if a person jumps up, because sometimes they might go up into the ceiling. Other times they may float around the room. If there is no law of gravity that says that when you jump up, you must come down, then you cannot predict. You cannot predict for certain what is going to happen if people jump up. And so if this universe came about by chance or by accident, there can be no law that governs it. Everything is by chance or by accident. So it cannot reasonably use scientific laws to argue that there is no God, but there can be no scientific laws without someone to have made these laws to govern everything that is made. Number 3, if there is no God, there can be no immaterial thing. And by immaterial, I mean something that you cannot touch, taste, feel, something that is not tangible, something that is not physical. If there is no God, there can be no immaterial thing. Yet there are immaterial things, such as information in the DNA of the genes, thoughts that we think, logic or reason that we may have to prove a point, truth, morality, and justice. These are not things that are physical and tangible. Number 4, if there is no God, there can be no right and wrong, which applies to everyone, everywhere. Yet the atheist is the first one to say that I am wrong in believing that there is a God. But how can you say that there is a right and a wrong about anything if there is no supreme lawgiver that states what is right and wrong for everyone, even if they disagree with it? It really amounts to individuals choosing for themselves what they prefer, and that they would not be able to say that everybody everywhere should go by their own preferences. Now let us look at the inconsistencies. Now this particular screen would help you for the final exam. This is what you need to know for your final exam. You just need to give one inconsistency. You don't have to list the 4 of them. You just need to deal with one of them, any one of them. There are 4 inconsistencies of the atheist presuppositions. Number 1, atheists use logic or reason to prove that there is no God. But this is inconsistent with their presuppositions. For if there is no God, logic or reason does not exist. That's the first inconsistency. If there is no God, logic or reason does not exist. If everybody's brain evolved by chance or accident or randomness, then there cannot be any one correct way of reasoning, since each brain would have a different way of reasoning. Another inconsistency between the presuppositions of atheists and what they argue in trying to prove there is no God is atheists refer to science to prove that there is no God. But science does not exist where there is randomness, chance, or accident. Randomness does not produce consistency, and without consistency, there can be no scientific law. Third inconsistency of the atheist presuppositions are atheists claim that there is no God, but they think that the only reality in the universe is matter, or that which is physical, tangible, and can be seen. But information in the DNA, thoughts, logic, morality, and rights are not material, yet they exist. And the fourth inconsistency of the atheist presuppositions are atheists claim that there is no God, but they believe that there is a right and wrong. The atheist presuppositions do not allow for right versus wrong, but for choices based on individual preferences or individual likes and dislikes. Further, there can be no right and wrong that applies to everyone, everywhere. But these ideas come from the individual instead of coming from a God outside of the individual who determines what is right and wrong for everyone, whether they agree with him or not. And you know, many atheists get into that trap because on the one hand, they will say that it was wrong for Adolf Hitler to kill 6 million Jews between 1939 and 1945 in what is known historically as the Holocaust. Yet, if there is no God, how can you say to the Nazis that they were wrong? What is the standard you are using? If it is a matter that there is no supreme lawgiver who has laws governing human behavior everywhere, then how can you use your individual standard of right and wrong and judge another set of people who think that it was in their interest to get rid of certain groups of people? Now, we know that what the Nazis did was terrible, but I'm just showing the inconsistency of the atheist presuppositions. In us, there is a belief that there must be a right and there must be a wrong. And we cannot get around that. We cannot run away from it. There is something right and there is something wrong. And oftentimes the atheists will say that this is wrong because in their heart they know it is wrong. The law of God is written in their heart and they know it is wrong. But if there is no God who has given the laws on how we ought to behave, whether we like what he says or not, then how can the atheist use his individual standard of right and wrong and judge other people for not doing what he or she thinks is right or wrong? So for the exam, you can take any one of these four. You don't need to even study all four. Any one of these four, and try to understand it so that you can put it in your own words. Okay, so you'll have to deal with one inconsistency in atheist presuppositions. Okay, now we come to lesson 17, entitled The Design Argument for the Existence of God. And for the purpose of the exam, you need to have a general knowledge of the three design features that you have on the screen. Okay, you need to have a general knowledge so that you can list them. You don't have to go into detail with all of them, but you must be able to list them. Here are the design features. You have, for example, in number 1, the DNA. I will come back to the DNA, but you should remember DNA to be able to list it. Number 2 is ATP. The full word is ATP synthase, which is a machine that goes on in the cell to generate electricity or power so that the cells and the organs and the systems of the body can have power to work and to function so that you can live. And the third one at the bottom is called kinesin motor. Kinesin means moving, and motor is an engine that causes movement. Now I'll get to these in more detail, but you must be able to at least list the 3 of them. We only studied 3 design features. There are many more, and only the 3 are to be listed. DNA, ATP synthase, synthase is SYNTHASE, and the third one is kinesin motor. Now, after this, you must be able to choose any one of these design features in the cell and be able to discuss it. You must be able to show how one of these design features proves that there must be a super intelligent designer. For example, let us start with number one. Let us say I choose number one to do this exam. DNA. Evolutionists admit that the information in the DNA was not produced by the proteins that make up the DNA. Information always comes from a mind. For example, how many of you have been on the toll road? Let us say the North and South Highway that leads from Kingston in the south to Runaway Bay in the north. Raise your hand if you have been on the toll road. Okay, good. Now, Enrico, when you go to the toll booth,
Yes, sir.
the first toll booth that you go to,
Yes, sir.
you don't have a human being that is there. They used to have a person there,
Yeah, well, yeah,
but
machine, though.
they have a machine. And what you do, you press a button,
And they give you a card.
and a card comes out. You don't even see anything on the card. The card just comes out. And then you hear a voice coming from the machine. Thank you. Have a safe journey. Sometimes jokingly, I look at the machine and say, thank you. And my wife laughs and wonders, why am I going on like an idiot? All right. Well, do you think the machine just got that voice by itself? No, it was programmed into the machine so that it may respond politely to the motorist who takes the card from the machine. And when you reach the second toll near to I think it is St. Anne's Bay. When you go to the next toll near St. Anne's Bay, you have a human being who takes the card from you, and you see on the screen before you your registration plate of your vehicle, how much money you are supposed to pay. It comes on automatically. The card has registered your number and registers how much you owe. Did the card just get that information by itself? No. Human minds, intelligent minds, pre-programmed this information into the card so that the person who takes the card may be able to know how much you owe for this particular vehicle. No information has ever come anywhere else but from an intelligent mind. That is a scientific fact. Any information that machines have come from an intelligent mind. Well, where did this information come from? In us, where did this information come from? But from someone who himself has an intelligent mind, far greater in intelligence than any one of us, that he was able to program the information in each cell of our body. Okay, so the evolutionists admit we don't know how the information got here. And we know that the proteins do not actually make the information. We just don't know how to answer the question. How did this information come into our cells? But the information always comes from a mind. Therefore, this information must have come from a super intelligent mind. And that is from whom? From God. If human beings did not design the DNA that has the information in our cells, And if natural selection, if natural processes which have no mind could not have randomly made it, then it must have been designed by the super intelligent mind, and that is God himself. So that is how you could argue that point if you use DNA. But let us say you use number 2, ATP synthase. ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. This is the basic substance needed for life in all living things, in vegetation, in animals, and in humans. It is produced by the tiniest motor in the universe. This motor is in the nucleus of each cell in all living things. The word synthase is a reference to the movement of 2 main parts of the motor. One is at the bottom and the other is at the top. And the one at the bottom is moving and causing the one at the top to move. And by moving around very fast, it is generating ATP, which produces electrical power in the cell. So we have a machine that is going all the time to produce ATP, which provides the power in each cell of the body for it to do its work. If that machine were to stop, what do you think would happen to every cell of the body? It would shut down. Just like some weeks ago, Jamaica Public Service Company, the flow of the electricity in here was not smooth. Some electrical power left this room, and we find that the laptop became black, the projector stopped projecting. If the electrical power in our cells stops working, the human being dies. So we see then that this is a remarkable machine. It is a remarkable machine. It could not have gradually evolved because every part of that machine was needed from the beginning in order for it to work, to produce electrical power. There is simply not enough time to wait until all the parts are evolved so that you could get a machine to generate electrical power. Otherwise, life would not even start. And if it doesn't start, how can you talk about it evolving? There's just no room for evolution in this. It must have been designed and created by a super intelligent mind, and that is the mind of who? God. But maybe you want to look at this interesting machine at the bottom. It is number 3. It is called kinesin motor. This is one of my favorite machines. Kinesin means moving, from the Greek word kine, which means move. Motor is an engine that causes movement. Each cell has several robots. The technical name is kinesin motor, which resemble human beings in stick figure, that walk on different pathways and carry behind them a sack or bag of proteins, which are the building blocks of living things, and they go with these proteins to different addresses in the cell to deliver specific amounts of protein at each address. And this enables the cell to grow and for organs and systems and living things to form. This design shows that there must be a super intelligent mind, that is God. Now it's amazing. These things are present in ourselves, and they work without us telling them what to do, and without us even knowing that they are there. It wasn't until recent times that microscopes developed the strength that people could actually see these small machines. So for the exam, you are to take one of these machines and prove to the reader, prove that the design feature of this machine proves that there must be a super intelligent designer. So you don't need to elaborate on each of these. You must be able to list them: DNA, ATP synthase, and kinesin motor. Remember those terms. But then you must, in another question, be able to take one of these machines and show how they prove that there must be a super intelligent designer. Now we go on to lesson 18, the existence of the universe argument for the existence of God. Now, I want us to jump down to number 5, because that is the part of this review that you need to know for your exam. Number 5 on this slide, it reads, here are clues as to which view is right. One view is nothing has always produced nothing. The atheistic view is that there was nothing at the beginning. Then all of a sudden, there was something. Well, nothing has always produced nothing. On the other hand, the universe shows careful, intelligent, and intentional planning and design. Here are some clues that you need to try to remember, or some parts of it. The first clue is in atoms. There is the ratio of electrons to protons of 1 to 1,836. Notice that precise figure. 1 to 1,836. And every atom has that ratio. If this ratio were any larger, or if this ratio were any smaller, atoms would not be able to come together to form molecules, such as water. So nothing would be able to form in the universe. And so if it were simply a matter of an accident that happened, something that was random, how do you get such a precise ratio in every atom that is out there in the universe? 1 to 1,836. The second clue is this. It has to do with the sun. Our sun is the right color. If it were redder or bluer, photosynthetic response in vegetation would be weaker. Let me explain photosynthetic response. There is a good reason why the majority of living things that are rooted in the dirt are green in color. They have micro or very tiny solar panels. And the solar panels take energy from the sunlight and transforms it along with the carbon dioxide that we breathe out into the air, and take up the water from the roots under the ground and combine it to form its food. That's why you don't have to feed it. You don't have to go out to the trees and to the plants and to the grass and give it chicken and rice and peas. Or you don't have to give it fruit punch. It's making its own food all the time. And if the sun was redder or bluer, let me explain something. The sun has different colors depending on the angle it is at to the earth. When I was in Montego Bay for the lectureship, I was watching a sunset right there in the Montego Bay harbor. And I saw a red sun. I'm not used to seeing a red sun, but on the horizon, the sun had become red. I'm used to seeing a bright yellow color, but the sun had become red. Now, it is saying here in the clues, if the sun were any redder than what it is, or if it were any bluer than what it is, then the plants would not be able to make enough food to feed itself. And if it doesn't have enough food to feed itself, what do you think would happen to all the green things around us?
They can't survive.
They would not survive. They would die. If the sun is also the right size, if the sun were larger, its brightness would change too quickly, so that when it becomes dim, the earth would freeze. And when it would become bright, the earth would burn up. If the sun were smaller, the earth would not be able to support life. Another thing is the earth's distance from the sun. It is crucial to be at this distance from the sun in order to have a stable water cycle. If the earth were too far away, most water would freeze. If it were too close, most water would boil. So the question is, how is it that there are so many details? There is such precise measurement that if there were any different measurement in what is out there, life could not go on. How did this all come about by chance and accident and randomness? Now, you need to know those clues. You need to be able to use 3 clues. How many clues do we have here? Let's see. We have the ratio, that's 1. The size of the sun, that's 2. The Earth's distance from the sun, that's 3. Okay, there are 3. Be able to use the 3 clues to show that the universe was created by a super intelligent being. So this particular page in number 5 about the clues, you need to focus on in order to prepare for the final exam. Okay, now we're finished with lessons 16, 17, and 18, and I'm going to bring up on the screen lessons 18, 19, and 20, if I can find them. Yes, that's you. Lessons 19 and 20. Jesus Christ's argument for the existence of God. And lesson 20, experiential argument for the existence of God. Okay, well, I did promise you that this would be in the second hour. And this would be a good time to take a break. So let's take a break now. And in the second hour, which will start at, let us say, 10:30, come back at 10:30 and we will continue. in the second hour to look at a review of Lesson 19 and Lesson 20. Listeners, I will talk to you in the meantime, but the students have a break until 10:30, and at 10:30 I will resume the regular programming. So any student that wants to go and drink water or eat something or just breathe some fresh air outside, you're welcome to go at this time. Now, I want to speak to any atheist or agnostic that is watching this program right now. What I want you to see is that accident and chance and coincidence cannot account for or explain the precise measurements that we have in the universe. Molecules could not form if the ratio between protons and electrons were any larger or smaller. There could be no life if the sun was any redder or bluer. There could be no life if the sun was larger or smaller. There could be no life if the earth was any closer or any farther from the sun. That does not sound like accident, chance, or randomness. There are too many evidences that will remove the possibility that all of these things could have happened by accident. This is the norm. It is not the exception. Accidents, you may categorize it in an exception, but these things are all over the universe. Signs of intelligent planning and design. And so I want to appeal to you to learn from this that there must be an intelligent designer. You need to get to know him. Now reason with me a little bit. If there is a God out there, then he can do far more than what any of us can do. Not only is he more intelligent than we are, but he must be able to communicate with us. He must be able to do things for us that we can't do for ourselves. Why do you atheists and agnostics think that if there is a God, he would not have communicated somehow with us? Don't you communicate with each other? We're living in an age of instant communication. When I was a child, I didn't have this laptop that I could go to different parts of the world and see what was going on right away, get instant news. But we're living in an age of instant communication. Why do you think it is unbelievable for someone with greater intelligence and power not to be able to communicate with us? Why do you think he would not want to communicate with people he has made? God has communicated, but you may ask, what evidence do you have of this? There is a book called the Bible, and the book claims that God spoke those words, and human beings whom God chose wrote down his words in different books that make up the Bible. But you may say, but anybody can claim to hear from a God and to write down words and say that they came from God. That's not proof. Well, yes, I have proof. Not only does the Bible claim that the words in it came from God, but it offers evidence to back it up. For example, in Genesis chapter 17, verse 12, God told Abraham 2,000 years before Jesus Christ was born that every 8-day-old male child born in his household, and any 8-day-old male child that descends from his household was to be circumcised on the 8th day. Now, it wasn't until 1939, and that is, if we use the date from which Moses wrote Genesis, which is approximately 1400 BC, then between 1400 BC and AD 1939, you have about 3,339 years after Moses wrote that on the 8th day, every 8-day-old male child born in Abraham's household was to be circumcised. There was a remarkable discovery made in that year by a medical doctor, also researcher, called Doisy, D-O-I-S-Y, who discovered that on the 8th day after birth, the blood clots the fastest than at any time before the 8th day and any time after the 8th day. So that indeed the best day an operation could be performed on a child, like circumcision, was the 8th day. Nobody in the time of Abraham knew this. Nobody in the time of Moses, when Moses recorded this, knew this. Then how come it is written in the Bible 3,339 years before it is discovered? Unless God told the writer Moses that the 8th day is the day, the only day, for the circumcision of a male child in the Hebrew nation to be done. Doesn't this show that God had communicated something to Moses that nobody else knew about? How do you explain that? Let me give you another one. The Bible tells us in Job chapter 26, verse 7, the earth hangs on nothing. In ancient times, nobody believed that the earth hanged upon nothing. In all the writings, there is no writing in ancient times that says that the earth hangs on nothing. On my mother's side, I descended from the Chinese. And I want you to know that the ancient Chinese believed that a great red dragon was under the earth, keeping it up. Why do you think they believed that? Because they could not think that it was possible for the earth, as heavy as it is, to be floating like it has no weight in space. We find that the ancient Greeks believed that there was a muscular giant called Atlas who supported the earth on his shoulders and on his neck and on his back. That's why in geography classes, students have a book that has maps of different countries, and the name of the book is called Atlas. This giant was called Atlas in ancient Greece. They believed that he was supporting the earth. Only the Bible, in all ancient writings, says that the earth hangs on nothing. This was not the time when human beings observed astronauts going up into space and seeing that in space, heavy objects on this earth have no weight. Nobody knew about that then. Then how is it that Job wrote that the earth hangs on nothing? Unless he got it from someone who knows far more than any human being knows, because he's the creator, and that is God. I want you, therefore, to think again. Isn't there a possibility you might be mistaken? That you might have drawn the wrong conclusion in saying that there is no God? You say, well, I have never seen him, and I have never heard him. But did you know that there are people who saw Jesus? And Jesus says, I and my Father are one. The words I speak, I don't speak them on my own. I got them from the Father. The miraculous works that I don't do them on my own either. The Father who dwells in me does these works. You know that Jesus existed. He is documented outside of the Bible as well as in the Bible. Well, if Jesus existed and he says that he is one with the Father and that he has all the characteristics of the Father, then can't you deduce from that that there must be God the Father who came in Jesus and said and did these things that Jesus said and did? Why is it that you find it so difficult? Don't you find it difficult to believe that nothing produced something? That's what you believe. Well, the creation implies there must be a creator. And so I want to encourage you in closing, before I get back to the regular class, believe in God. Put your faith in him. Ask him to open your understanding, to understand if there is a God. Search him out for yourself. Don't dismiss him just like that. There's too much evidence for God being around for you to dismiss him like that. Search for him. If you really want to find him and to know for sure if there is a God, pray and ask him to show you. Let him open your understanding, and he will help you to find him, because he's not far from each one of us, and he wants you to know him so that you can be saved. Because you can't be saved, that is, you can't be forgiven by God and live forever in his kingdom, unless you know him. Jesus said, this is life eternal, that they might know thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ whom thou hast sent. John chapter 17, verse 3. Now we come to the second part of our program. We're looking at a review of lessons 19 and 20. And I'm going to skip the specific objectives and go right into the review itself. Lesson 19. Jesus Christ and God the Father have one and the same characteristics of God, so that Jesus Christ is in the Father and the Father is in Jesus Christ. To know Jesus Christ is to know God the Father. To see Jesus Christ is to see God the Father. In the Gospel of John, chapter 10, verse 30, Jesus said, I and my Father are one. In John chapter 14, verses 7 through 11, Jesus said to his disciples, if ye had known me, ye would have known my Father also. From henceforth ye have seen him and have known him. Philip saith unto him, Lord, show us the Father, and it sufficeth us. It will be enough for us. Jesus said to Philip, have I been so long time with you, Philip, and yet hast thou not known me? He that hath seen me hath seen the Father. How sayest thou then, show us the Father? Believest thou not that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me? The words that I speak them not of myself, but the Father who dwells in me, he doeth the works. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father in me, or else believe me for the very work's sake. Now, that is important for you to know for your final exam. If you're going to deal with this question, you need to know what is Jesus Christ's relationship with God the Father. That is a very important argument for the existence of God, because no person who doesn't believe in God, who has really read the books out there on history, can really deny the existence of Jesus Christ. He is documented in Jewish history, in Roman history, and in Christian history outside of the Bible. And he's also documented by eyewitness testimonies in the Bible itself. And so if you atheist friends out there agree with me that Jesus Christ is a historical figure, that he indeed was here on this earth in the flesh, then how do you explain the relationship that Jesus has with the Father? He says to know him is to know the Father. To see him is to see the Father. So even though you have not personally seen the Father, in history, many people saw his Son and saw the Father at work in his Son in the words that Jesus spoke and in the miraculous works that he performed. And so if we saw Jesus, if people in history saw Jesus, then through Jesus they saw the invisible Father in heaven, who was working through his Son. So that's one of the exam questions. You need to know the relationship between Jesus Christ and God the Father. Another thing on this screen that you need to pay attention to, you must be able to give two proofs that what Jesus Christ said about his relationship with God the Father is true. Now, Jesus gave several proofs. In number 2 on the screen, look at the proofs he gave. A, he spoke the word of his Father. In John chapter 7, verse 16, Jesus said, "My doctrine," meaning my teaching, "is not mine." It didn't start with me. It did not originate with me, but his that sent me. In John chapter 12, verses 49 through 50, Jesus says, "I have not spoken of myself, but the Father gave me a commandment, what I should say and what I should speak. And I know that his commandment is life everlasting. Therefore, whatever I have said, the Father has said it also." B, here's another proof that Jesus is one with the Father. He did the miraculous works of God the Father. In the Gospel of John, chapter 5, verse 36, Jesus said, and I quote in part, "The works that I do bear witness of me that the Father has sent me." What were these works? It was turning water into wine. It was causing a nobleman's son who was very sick and had fever to become well again. It was a crippled man who had been crippled for 38 years, who was made well so that he could get up, take up his mat on which he used to sleep, and go home, and leave the pool of Bethesda in Jerusalem and go home. It was feeding 5,000 men, in addition to women and children, with 5 barley loaves and 2 tiny fish. It was walking on the Sea of Galilee in stormy weather between 3 and 6 in the morning. Not swimming, but he was walking on top of the surface of the water in stormy water. It was giving sight to a man who was born blind at Jerusalem, who had never seen anything before. It was raising Lazarus from the dead, a good friend of his, who had been dead and had started to decay and to smell bad. He had been dead for 4 days, and there was no refrigeration in those days. And so they had to bury people quickly. And he had been dead and buried for 4 days. And Jesus said, Lazarus, come out. And the thing is, it wasn't just believers that saw this and heard this. It was unbelievers like the Pharisees, the bitterest enemies of Jesus in Israel. And they came together for an emergency meeting. And they said, what are we doing? This man is doing many miracles. If we leave him like this, the whole world will believe in him. You find that in John chapter 11 and around verse 47. So you have people who didn't believe in Jesus testifying about himself being from the Father and having the very nature of the Father, but they did not deny that Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead and had done all these other miracles. They did not deny it. And so we find that these miraculous works prove that God the Father sent Jesus and did these works through him. Another proof that Jesus is one with the Father, see, he fulfilled the prophecies in the Old Testament scriptures about the coming of Christ to save people from their sins. Jesus sums it up in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24, verses 44 through 47. He says, these are the words which I spake unto you while I was yet with you, that all things must be fulfilled, which were written in the law of Moses, and in the prophets, and in the Psalms concerning me. Then opened he their understanding. Yes.
Yeah. What's the difference between speak and spoke? Because I know that both of them are referring to the past, if I should say.
That's correct.
Yeah, so
there is no difference in meaning. The difference is in spelling, and the difference is in the century in which that English word was used. Spake, S-P-A-K-E, is a 17th century English word, which is now spelt in our 21st century as S-P-O-K-E. Now, the reason why we have it in this Bible, the King James Version, which is the most popular English translation of the Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek of the Old and New Testaments, is that this is a 17th century English translation. And at the time, everybody was speaking like that. And so if you and I were living back in the 17th century and we were speaking English, we would just say, Maxime spake unto me yesterday. And thus did Maxime speak. We would use the language that we read in the King James Version. That was the everyday language spoken. That's why we have modern English translations in which they use what is being spoken now by people, so that they can better understand what the scripture is teaching. But it means the same thing, past tense of the word to speak.
And then again, when you say it depends on the context.
All right, what depends on the context?
When you say speak or spoke.
Okay, well, the context would be the same. The context would have to refer to something that happened in the past, since it is past times, past tense. But the reason why it is spelt and pronounced differently in the King James Version is that this is a translation made back in 1611. And we use it still because it's a great translation. And we also use modern English translations with it. But it's a great translation. Okay, so going back to the scripture in Luke chapter 24, verse 44, Jesus says, "These are the words which I spake unto you while I was yet with you, that all things must be fulfilled, which were written in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms concerning me." At that time, that was the Bible that they had. The Bible was not completely revealed all at one time, but it was revealed up to that point so that they had the first part of the Bible, which we call today the Old Testament. That is what Jesus is referring to. Then Jesus sums up the prophecies. "Thus it is written, and thus it behoved Christ." Behoved means it was necessary for Christ to suffer and to rise from the dead the third day, and that repentance and remission of sins should be preached in his name among all nations, beginning at Jerusalem. So he summed up the prophecies, and Jesus fulfilled those prophecies. In Luke chapter 23, we read about his sufferings on the cross. And in Luke chapter 24, we read about his resurrection from the dead on the third day. And so that is another proof. Now, somebody may argue, you can get people to kill you and then say that you are fulfilling prophecy. Okay, well, let us just agree with that point just for the sake of argument. I don't really agree with it, but let us just agree with it for the sake of argument. How then would you explain that on the third day after having been put to death, that he was no longer dead, and that a soldier who was trained in killing people, according to the Gospel of John chapter 19, plunged a spear into Jesus' side to make sure he was dead? He didn't faint. He wasn't unconscious, and then recovered consciousness in the tomb. He was actually dead. He was gone. How do you explain him fulfilling the prophecy of being raised from the dead on a specific day, the third day following his death, or even rising from the dead at all? So he fulfilled prophecy, and I have a question for you, atheists out there, and you agnostics. If Jesus' resurrection is well supported by witnesses and resulted in the conversion of a man called Saul of Tarsus, who was trying to literally destroy Christians by having them put to death, at least you're not trying to put me to death. You just don't believe there is a God, or you doubt there is a God. But this man was trying to put every Christian to death he could lay his hands on. And he wasn't satisfied to do it only in the land of Israel. He went to Syria looking for Christians there to have them put to death also. He was a security threat. How was he converted? He himself testified later on that he saw a bright light, and he heard the voice of Jesus asking him, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It is hard for you to kick against the pricks." In other words, you're just hurting yourself. And Saul said that he started to tremble. And he asked, "Who are you, Lord?" And the voice answered, I am Jesus of Nazareth, whom you persecute. And Saul was never the same. He became the leading advocate or spokesman for Jesus being raised from the dead and being the Savior of the world, and was willing to lay down his life, literally, later on, because of that faith. If there were no resurrection, this man would never be converted. And I say something further. If there was a resurrection, then there has to be a God who sent Jesus. For if there is no God, there is no life after death. There has to be a God. Once you see that there is a resurrection established by historical witnesses, then there must be a God. So here is another proof. He fulfilled prophecies about the coming of Christ to save people from their sins. Another proof, D. His own prophecies are coming true every day. Did you know that Jesus' prophecies are making the headlines every single day? Let me tell you. Jesus said in Luke chapter 18, verse 8, when the Son of Man cometh, will he find faith on the earth? Jesus knew that as the time drew nearer to his return, that many people throughout the world would lose faith in God. And you're one of them. Whoever is watching who is an atheist and agnostic, you have lost your faith in God. Jesus prophesied about you. You are fulfilling prophecy. When the Son of Man cometh, will he find faith on earth? Another prophecy Jesus made was in Matthew chapter 24, verse 12. He said, because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. Do you know what that is saying? Iniquity means lawlessness, unrighteousness, wickedness. Abound is from a Greek word that literally translated means multiply. Lawlessness shall be multiplied. That means there will be a rapid increase of lawlessness and wickedness. Well, that's logical. With a decrease in faith throughout the world will come a corresponding increase in lawlessness. Because if you don't believe there is a God, you're not going to believe that the Bible is the Word of God. And if you don't believe that the Bible is the Word of God, you will not accept it as the international standard to decide what is right and wrong. You will do what is right in your own eyes, as they did in the time of the judges of Israel. Judges chapter 17, verse 6, Judges chapter 21, verse 25. And that's what is happening. Let me tell you some of the wickedness going on. There are men who claim that they're now women and that they should compete on women's teams and that they should use female restrooms and go into female dorms, and yet they are still men, but they identify themselves as women. That's wickedness. You have homosexuals and lesbians who are effectively campaigning for equality in marriage. They're saying that if heterosexuals, people of the opposite sexes, have the right to marry, then people of the same sex should have the right to marry. And so they have changed what God said marriage is, which is God joining a man and a woman together to be one. And they have added to it the definition that people of the same sex may be joined to each other. That's the wickedness that's happening in our world today. Let me give you one more example. Near to the end of 2018, the United Nations group of experts came together and they made a public declaration asking all member states, all 193 member states of the United Nations, that their governments should remove all restrictions on abortion and allow women who think they need an abortion to get it without any penalty or punishment being placed upon them. And they have also said for equal protection of the mother and of her unborn child. They don't think that the unborn child should get any protection by the United Nations. Killing unborn children, that is what is happening in our world, and it's getting worse. And so these prophecies are proof that Jesus came from God and is one with God the Father. One more proof, his resurrection is a historical fact, which was seen by eyewitnesses. Peter on the day of Pentecost said, "This Jesus hath God raised up, whereof we are all witnesses." Acts chapter 2, verse 32. You know where he said that? It was in the city of Jerusalem. It was in the very same city where the leaders of the Jewish people declared that Jesus should be put to death on the cross. And if their authorities had the body of Jesus, when Peter made this declaration, "This Jesus hath God raised up, whereof we all are witnesses," why didn't they produce the body to tell Peter, "Peter, you're mistaken. See the body of Jesus"? Again, in Acts chapter 3, verse 15, Peter says that God raised Jesus from the dead, and we are witnesses of this fact. In Acts chapter 10, verses 40 to 41, Peter said again that God raised Jesus from the dead, and that Jesus appeared to witnesses that were chosen before by God, who ate and drank with him after he arose from the dead. So there were witnesses. And therefore we're dealing with a historical fact. And this is another proof that Jesus is one with God the Father. So in your exam, you are to give two proofs that what Jesus Christ said about his relationship with God the Father is true. In your final exam, you're to give two proofs that what Jesus Christ said about his relationship with God the Father is true. You can use any of these proofs in number 2 from A to E, any two of them. So in your revision, when you're looking at the review that I will send to you to your email this afternoon, God willing, or this evening, you can focus on any two of the proofs in number 2 from A to E to deal with that. Now, how may you prove that there is a God based on Jesus Christ's relationship with God the Father? Well, let us look at number 3. Jesus Christ's existence proves the existence of God the Father, who sent him, spoke through him, worked miracles through him, and showed his love through him. Okay, so number 3 will give you some idea about that. So you need to understand my Father are one in order to prove that there is a God. Okay, since Jesus existed, and he says he's one with the Father, then God also must exist. Jesus said God sent him. Jesus said the words he spoke came from God. He said that works that he did, the miracles he performed, were done by God who was dwelling in him. And of course, we know that Jesus showed the Father's love through acts of kindness to people. So how may you prove that there is a God based on Jesus Christ's relationship with God the Father? Number 3 could help you, and you could develop it in your answer. Now we come to lesson number 20, the experiential argument for the existence of God. Now I'm going to be showing you some ways of identifying experiences of God in everyday life. Now, in this section, you need to focus on this idea. Here is the idea. If God is real, then he can be experienced. And you must be able to discuss it. I'll soon show you how to develop that. If God is real, then he can be experienced. You must be able to discuss that. Now let us look at this idea. Look at number 1. Since there is a God, he shows himself to us in our daily lives. Not only when we read about him in the Holy Scriptures, but in our experiences of God in our daily life. Now you may be wondering, Brother Buckland, how do I know I'm experiencing God at this time or that time? What must I hear or what must I see or feel to know that I am experiencing God? I will come to the specific information. Okay, here is how you know you are experiencing God. Since there is a God, we have life, for he is the one who created life. Without him, there would be no life at all. That's what the Apostle Paul said to the people of Athens. I'd like you to turn your Bible to Acts chapter 17, verses 25 and 28. And I must tell you, this might be the easiest section of the text. I mean, if you're dealing with experiences of God, you're dealing with what you know, what you have seen, what you have heard, what you have felt. Okay, so there would be a lot of information you could give on that. But let us look at God being the source of life. Look at Acts chapter 17 and verse 25. Okay, it says, neither is worship with men's hands, as though he needed anything, seeing he giveth to all life and breath and all things. Notice he says, he giveth to all life and breath and all things. So I want to ask you, do you have life this morning? There is life. Do you have breath in your mouth this morning?
Yep.
Well, it says that God gives to all life and breath and all things. That all things can mean anything you need to continue to live. Your food, your drink, the materials from which people make clothing. He gives you healing when you're sick. He has built your body with an immune system that fights against germs and gets you to recover. If you get a wound, the body can heal itself. He made the body with the ability to heal itself. He has created plants that can be medicinal in value, that can speed up the healing process. All of this comes from God. He created everything. So he gives to all life and breath and all things. So since there is a God, we have life, for he is the one who created life. Without him, there would be no life at all. So one of the experiences that we have of God is that we have life, and we have breath, and everything else that we need to continue to have life. That came from God. If there were no God, there would be no life, there'd be no breath, there'd be no food, there'd be no drink, there'd be no healing, there'd be nothing at all that we could have life and continue to live. Another way to experience God, number 3, since there is a God, he provides, oh, I didn't read verse 28, so let me read verse 28 before we move on to 23, to number 3. Verse 28 says, for in him is referring to whom? Jesus. Or the Father, either of them will do. In him we live and move and have our being. As certain also of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. In him we live. Now this means that if there were no God, we could not live. How is it we live? In him we live. God is everywhere, providing the breath of life for all living things. God provides the sunshine and the heat and the warmth so that things may grow. He provides the rain so we can get water. He provides the fruit trees that we can get fruits to eat. If there were no God, there would be no means of living. In him we live. In him we move, which is a sign of life, and have our being, our very existence depends on God. One way to prove God is, I exist, therefore God exists. If God didn't exist, I could not exist, because in him I have my own being or existence. Okay, so since God exists, I have life, and I have breath, and I have everything I need for life. Now, moving on to number 3 on the screen. Since there is a God, he provides our breath of life, our food, our drink, and our clothing. Without him, there would be no breath, no food, no drink, and no materials out of which clothing is made. Now, since I read Acts chapter 17, verse 25 already, I'd like somebody to volunteer to read Acts chapter 14 and verse 17.
Nevertheless,
Yes.
he did not leave himself without witness.
He did not leave himself without witness. So there are certain things going on in life that testify that God is around. Let us hear it.
In that he did God.
Yes.
Gave us rain from heaven and fruitful seasons, filling our heart with food and gladness.
Okay, so he has done good to the human race. He gives rain from heaven. He gives seasons in which different trees bear fruits. All trees don't bear fruits at the same time.
Yes.
And you have the different seasons when the mango tree will bear mangoes, or the plantain tree will bear plantains, the banana tree will bear bananas, the orange tree will bear oranges. That's from God. Human beings never made any plantain, or any orange, or any mango. Human beings did not make water. These come from God, and these bear witness that there is a God who does us good. So whenever you get your plantain or your banana, whenever you get your mango or your sugar cane, bear in mind these are witnesses to the existence and the goodness and the kindness of God. That's how you experience God. You experience God in these good things God has given to us. Moving on to number 4. Since there is a God, he answers our prayers. He gives us our daily food. I'd like someone else to read Matthew chapter 6, verse 11. The first one to find it, could you read it for us? And on the internet viewers, if you have your Bible there with you, turn to Matthew chapter 6, verse 11. Anyone has it?
Give us this day our daily bread.
That's part of the prayer Jesus taught his disciples to pray. Give us this day our daily bread. In the Hebrew language, bread is many times used to represent food in general. So the Hebrew word lechem, meaning bread, oftentimes refer not just to the bread like hardo bread or sliced bread, but refers to chicken, to rice and peas, potatoes, bananas, anything that you eat. That is referred to as bread. So it has a broader meaning in many scriptures than just the actual bread or loaves of bread. Okay, so when Jesus says, give us this day, today, our daily bread, or the bread we need every single day, he's acknowledging that God is the one who provides the food that we need for each day to live. And when we get that food, we see God at work. We see his kindness to us. Let me illustrate that. Some years ago, when I was much younger, but I was married, and I believed I had a daughter already, I was invited by the principal of Drews Avenue Primary School to conduct devotions for the little children. And I did so voluntarily because I saw it as an opportunity to influence the little children to believe in God and to believe in Christ, and hopefully in the future to become followers of Christ. I didn't do it out of any motive of getting any material thing from the school. My only motive was to enjoy worship of God with the children and influence them to believe in and to follow God. But that morning, when I woke up to get myself ready to go to the devotion, I realized that I had run out of money for buying food for my family. You see, I have to budget money for different aspects of my family's life. Some money is set aside for buying food. Some money is set aside to pay the water bill, the electricity bill. Some money is set aside for transportation costs. And so I found that the money that I had budgeted for the month was finished, and the month was not at its end. I think it was about the second week in the month. I had two more weeks. Well, 3 more weeks, because I was at the beginning of the second week. And the money for groceries was done. Strangely enough, I didn't even pray and ask God for my daily bread. All I was thinking about the morning when I got up was to go to the Drews Avenue Primary School. And I went and I had a wonderful devotion with the children. and the principal and the vice principal thanked me for coming. And when I went to the bus stop to take a bus to go back home, because I only had a few dollars for bus fare, and then I wasn't even thinking about groceries. There was a little girl that called out to me and said, "Mr. Buckland, wait. Don't go yet, Mr. Buckland, wait." And she crossed over the road, Washington Boulevard. She handed me an envelope from the vice principal, and the girl told me, the vice principal said, "This is to help you with taxi fare to go home." And I thanked the girl and told her to say thanks to the principal and the vice principal. And then I said to myself, I don't need to take a taxi home. I have bus fare. It was $500 in the envelope. And in those days, $500 was worth a whole lot more than it is worth now. It could buy a lot more. And so you know what I did with the $500? When I left there and I came off in my neighborhood, I went to the supermarket and I bought groceries. I never even prayed. But God saw that I'd run out, and God worked it out that I was provided with taxi fare, which I used instead to buy food that the family would need. Now that is what I call experiencing God. God provided my daily bread. Also in number 4b, he gives us direction in life. I'd like someone to find Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 through 6.
Trust in the Lord with all your heart.
Continue.
And lean not on your own understanding.
Yes.
In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your path.
Thank you. In all your ways, that is, in all that you have to do in life, for this or that day, go to God and pray to him and let him know that you need his direction, and trust in him to lead you in the way that is best. It may not be the way that you had chosen, but it will be the best. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and what will he do for you? He will direct thy path. Okay, I have tried that out, and believe you me, it works. I have woken up and entrusted my day into the hands of God. I've asked him for direction. I've asked him to help me to see what to do, what decision to make. And he does answer the prayer. He does direct your path. James chapter 1 verse 5. Who has that one?
Yes.
Yes. Chapter 1 and verse 5. Okay, for the sake of our Maxine, go ahead.
If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all liberally and without reproach, and it will be given to him.
Okay, now notice it says that God liberally gives wisdom to everyone who asks him in faith. You must believe that even now, when you might have difficult decisions to make, and you're not sure which of the decisions is the best one, ask God. Ask him to help you to understand what decision to make. And he will put wisdom inside of you to know what is the best choice to make. Okay, so that is another way of experiencing God. Another way of experiencing God, see, he makes our plans to succeed. Proverbs chapter 16 verse 3. Who would like to read that for us?
Command your work to the Lord, and
Yes.
your thought will be established.
Commit thy works unto the Lord. That is, whatever it is you want to do, tell God about it. Hand it over to Him. Entrust what you want to do into the hands of God. And He will make it succeed. He will make what you plan to do work out. I have experienced that over and over again. That whenever I have a plan, I ask God, Lord, this is what I plan to do. Please help it to get success. Let it work. Psalm 37 verse 5 is a similar scripture. Let us hear it.
Command your way to the Lord, trust also in Him, and He shall bring it to pass.
Yes, commit thy way to the Lord. That is what you plan to do. Let God have it. Give it to Him. Trust in Him, and He will bring it to pass. That is, He will let it work out. He will let it become a reality. And so when you find this happening, you know that God is working. Okay. D, He protects us and delivers us from our enemies. That's an important one. Because as followers of Christ, you're going to have people hating you and saying bad things about you and perhaps trying to hurt you. But did you know that you can pray to God for protection? And He will protect you? Let us hear Psalm 37, verses 7 to 11.
Rest on the Lord, and wait partially for Him. Do not fear because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who winds wicked shames to pass. Cast from anger and forsake wrath. Do not thought it only cases harm, for evil those shall be cut off. But those who wait on the Lord, they shall inherit the earth. For yet a little while, and the wicked shall be no more. Indeed, you shall look carefully for his place, but it shall be no more. But the meek shall inherit the earth, and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace.
All right. So what David is saying here, don't worry when wicked people look like they're succeeding in life. Trust God. Wait patiently for Him to act. He will protect you, and He will ensure that those wicked people get what they deserve. In a little while, you won't see them. But those who are meek and humble and righteous, God will preserve their lives, and He will give them peace. So God can protect you and deliver you from your enemies. So these are some everyday ways you can know that you are experiencing God. You have life. You have breath. God provides you with your food. He gives you wisdom to make the right decision. He makes your plans succeed. He protects you from your enemies. Now you can look into your life. We're looking at number 5 now. Give at least 2 experiences of God that you have had. You can think, based upon what I have shared with you here, you can think, have I in the past experienced hunger?
Yep.
And God provided for me when I needed help? Someone was kind to me. You know, when I was studying in the United States, I was depending on a church for support, financial support. And one time, they did not send some support for several weeks. And I went home with a roommate in a holiday and was staying at the home with him. And all there was in the house to eat were 2 salamis in the freezer. I did not eat for an entire day. And on the second day, I had a migraine headache and I didn't have strength. It was an upstairs place and I had to climb up the steps. And as a young man, I wasn't even 20 yet. I don't think I was 20 yet. Maybe I was 20, but maybe I was 19. I was young. I was feeling difficulty climbing the steps because I felt so weak, not having eaten for an entire day and entire night, and another day had come. And I prayed to God, God, I am hungry, and I don't have any money in my pockets. I don't have anything, and I'm in a foreign country, I'm not in my homeland. Did you know there was a next door neighbor and nobody told her anything, to the best of my knowledge? I wasn't speaking out loud, I was speaking to God in my heart. Nobody was hearing what I was saying. But there was this young woman next door that invited my roommate and myself to come and eat at her home. And she had a lot of food on the table, and I gave God thanks for answering my prayer because I had no money. And there was just 2 pieces of salami that were frozen in the freezer, and that was it. So I experienced God through this neighbor who invited my roommate and myself to eat. That's how you experience God, through the kindness of others. God provided us the food. So that's an experience I've had. So you can think, God has provided for me when I was hungry. Or my being at the school of preaching. Is God providing an opportunity for me to fulfill my ambition to be a preacher of the Word of God? That's another way I'm experiencing God. And maybe there are churches that are trying to help you out financially so that you can buy things to eat and cook things. That's a way you experience God. So if you were to be given this kind of question about giving 2 experiences of God that you have had, you can think from now, what has God done in my life that I can say, this must be God working in my life? Let me tell you an experience I had just last night with God. I took my daughter to the University of the West Indies. And she studies there. Okay. And while I was there, I had my daughter's laptop. And ordinarily, her laptop has a defect in that unless it is near a modem, she cannot get the internet. And I was sure that I would not be able to access the internet because of past experiences. To my great surprise, when I put the laptop down and plugged it in, the internet immediately came up on the screen. I didn't even have to look for the internet. Yet in the past, I saw an X where the internet sign would be or symbol would be. Now I saw a few sticks indicating that the internet was on. The reason I needed to be on the internet is that before I left in the afternoon to take my daughter to the University of the West Indies, there was an atheist on Facebook that was trying to answer my arguments for the existence of God and trying to show me that what I was saying was nonsense. And I didn't think that in the late hours that I would go back home after my daughter's evening class, that I would be able to answer him when I would get back home that night. And then I said, look, I have an opportunity now to answer this man. And I prayed to God and said, God, I need your help now. Give me the wisdom to say the right things to this atheist in response to his reply to me. And I was able to type in my answers. And I said, you know, this must be God because this didn't happen before. I couldn't access the internet from my daughter's laptop. And I got it without even looking for it. God wanted me to answer this atheist right away. Don't wait another day. Answer him right away, which I did. So think from now, what is it that God is doing in my life that shows that he's really there listening to my prayers and he is hearing and answering my prayers and doing things for me that I know it's not just me, it is God at work. God is working on my behalf right now. So you can use those experiences that you have had of God. Okay, now let me tell you, there are 10 questions in all, but you will only be required to answer any 5 of them. So make sure that you look for the 5 you can answer the very best, so you can get the highest mark for your exam. Okay, so I have taken you through the review, and I've emphasized what needs to be emphasized. For this part now, let me just repeat. If God is real, then he can be experienced. You must be able to discuss that idea. If God is real, then he can be experienced. And then there is another one based on this lesson, only 2 questions based on this lesson. Be able to give 2 experiences, you, not me, you have had of God. Now this would be a very easy one, because I know that you have had many experiences. Perhaps in the past you did not know God was in that experience, but now you know that God is in our everyday experiences of life. You can use your many experiences. I just need 2 of them if you choose to answer that question. So let me just go through and then finish. In lesson 16, which deals with the presuppositional argument for the existence of God, you need to know what the word presuppositional means. You also need to be able to discuss one inconsistency in atheist presuppositions. There are 4 of them, but just choose one and know that one very well. You must be able to remember the 3 design features of the cell, such as the DNA that has the information for the cell, the ATP synthase, that very tiny motor that generates electricity in the cell, and the kinesin motor, that walking stickman robot that takes the sack of proteins to different addresses in the cell, and be able to take one of these design features and show that there must be a super intelligent designer. And then in lesson 18 about the existence of the universe shows that there must be God. There are 3 clues that I've given you that shows that the universe could not have happened by accident, because it is so precise. If the earth things like that was any closer to the sun, the relationship Jesus has with the Father, Another one is you must be able to give 2 proofs that what Jesus said about his relationship with the Father is true. Another one is you must be able to prove that there is a God based on Jesus Christ's relationship with him. And then lesson 20, if God is real, then he can be experienced, he can discuss that. And then you describe any 2 experiences you have had of God. Do you have any question on that? Okay, well that should be easy for you if you prepare yourself. 5 questions, but you will have 10. You'll choose 5 of them you can answer the best. And you only need to use this revision PowerPoint that I will send to you. It is enough for you to be able to have the information to do well on your exam. Now I'm going to be giving you 10 minutes. I have taken up more time than what I should. And so I'm going to be asking us to come back about 11:45. So I'm giving you about 12 minutes. And we will start our Hebrew. Viewers, we have come to the end of this broadcast. I hope that those atheists and agnostics who have heard will think about the possibility that there is a supreme being who created everything and who loves them and who has communicated with them what he wants them to do to be saved and to live a life that is pleasing in his sight. In the next 12 minutes, we're going to be starting the next class, Introduction to Biblical Hebrew. God permitting, please join us at that time.